Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens. India has begun an outreach to mitigate trade challenges ahead of the imposition of additional 25% tariffs. India's ambassador to US, Vinay Kwatra, spoke to Democrat Senator Richard Blumenthal and shared the country's perspective on securing energy needs. He highlighted the importance of growing India-US energy ties. He has also reached out to Democrat Senator Chris Van Hollen. This comes days after Kwatra spoke to Republican Senator Lindsey Graham and discussed the same. This also comes ahead of a meeting between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Blumenthal and Graham were leading co-sponsors of a bipartisan bill to impose additional sanctions on Russia and penalties on countries that buy Russian oil, including India, China and Brazil. Remember, Trump has extended the trade truce with China for another 90 days, but India and Brazil continue to face tariff rates of 50%. India defended its purchases, saying that it started buying Russian oil with the encouragement of US to help stabilize oil prices when the Ukraine war began. India's energy imports from the US have grown by 70% year-on-year between January and June. India has already purchased $7 billion worth of oil and gas in 2025 so far. Its energy purchases from US could jump to over $14 billion by the end of FY26. To take this discussion forward, I'm now joined by Amitendu Palit. He is the Senior Research Fellow and Research Lead of Trade and Economics at the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Palit, how significant is this outreach that the Indian ambassador is leading with top US politicians?
First, for inviting me to your show. Always a pleasure to be with you, and particularly at a point in time when the diplomatic activity is at its peak, not just on part of India, but I'm pretty much sure on part of most other trade partners of the United States. Coming specifically to the meeting that you mentioned, Parikshit, I think there are a couple of important things to be noted here. The first is this is something which, when I say this, I refer to the Russian penalty that has come on India of 25% additional tariffs. This is something which India wasn't really expecting, and you can't really fault India on the ground because a bilateral trade negotiation was going on, and there was enough commitment by India to a successful resolution of a bilateral trade deal. But suddenly, on top of that, if something like this comes in without any inkling of the fact that it is going to come in, you are caught by surprise. So to that extent, I think India has every reason to feel let down by this additional 25% tariffs. And the fact that it's only India and Brazil which have been pushed these tariffs make an indication of the fact that for whatever reasons, India and Brazil are being singled out by President Trump in his treatment of countries at this point in time. So for India, it becomes important to engage diplomatically and strategically on three fronts. The first is obviously with the United States. And when it comes to the United States, I think what India has started doing is that it has started engaging with legislators, as well as those people in the United States who have a view on this subject. And that view reportedly is not a very favorable view. So it's important to connect to those people who have this opinion that those countries that are buying energy products from Russia need to be penalized. And the fact that India is one of those topmost countries, and it is doing so on grounds of its own long to medium term strategic interests and security interests, is something which needs to be explained to these group of people. So to that extent, I think it's a very important signal that you have recorded and sent in terms of capturing the details of the meeting. But I'll also take this opportunity, Parikshit, to just add, I think there are two other parallel outreaches which are happening on part of India. The first is, of course, with Russia. And there is the report of the EAM going to visit Russia very soon. But I think the most significant outreach is the news that Prime Minister himself might be traveling to China at the end of the month. And let us not forget, all these are happening around a number of other significant bilateral meetings that are taking place between President Putin and President Trump, and also a meeting between President Xi and President Trump, which is supposed to take place sometime around the end of October when the APEC summit takes place in Korea. So I think we will see a lot of these simultaneous parallel extra actor to extra actor engagements taking place as we see the next phase of the drama unfolding.
Do you also feel, Amitendu Palit, that's very important for India to give a sense of the long-term purchases which are already in the pipeline? For example, our sources tell us that energy imports from US are up 70% on a year-on-year basis. They will cross possibly $14 billion dollars by the end of this fiscal. There will be defense contracts that we will be giving to US industry as well. Do you think it's very important for India to keep making this point to US legislators, US officials, and even to Donald Trump somehow that there is so much more which is in the pipeline, and don't negate all of it?
Parikshit, I accept your point that this is an important information which needs to be conveyed to the US legislative members, primarily because of the fact that there is so much of noise, so much of internal confusion, even within the United States over the American tariffs, who's getting what rate, who is being paused when, who is being cut to half when. So it's important to make this point that India, indeed, if it is being penalized on the purchase ground, it is important to note this point, and it should be noted by the legislators. But I don't think India should use this as an excuse that we are buying a lot of US energy imports. As a result of that, we should be allowed flexibility on the Russian purchase. I think that's not the point at all. Whether India buys more imports from the United States or not, the fact remains that there are two clear rationales behind India buying more energy from Russia. The first of it is the fact that if India had not been buying Russian crude oil along with a couple of other countries, by this time, since the outbreak of the Ukraine war, Russia would have offloaded that entire bulk of unsold crude oil onto the global markets. The global spot purchases for crude oil would have gone for a toss. And I think India has played a very important role in stabilizing the global crude oil prices. This is a fact which, in fact, the American establishment had endorsed earlier during the Biden administration, that India did play a supporting role so far as stabilizing global crude oil prices are concerned by buying more of Russian oil, number one. Number two, India is a country which imports, an extensive amount of crude oil. It is the world's most populous economy. It is the world's fourth largest economy. And there is no question about the fact that it requires fossil fuels. Now, in that respect, any country, whether it be US, whether it be anybody else, needs to respect India's choice insofar as making an economic decision for sourcing is concerned. It is an economically logical and rational decision for India to look at a variety of options before itself and choose which one and how it will combine in its spot and forward purchase portfolios. You will recall that in the past, India had made mixes of the Brent and the Dubai crude variety in its oil purchase baskets, depending upon the kind of requirements it faced. So I don't see any reason why India should be apologetic in this regard, or even trying to make a mention of this, that look, we are buying more energy from the United States. That's why. This is something which needs to be looked at a different perspective.
Absolutely. So we need to convey, and possibly what we are conveying, that India will always take decisions on the basis of our energy security needs, our national security needs. And this is a relationship that we have with Russia, which is very important as well and has to be balanced. But Mr. Palit, my question to you would be, how do you think India will fare in the coming months? Clearly, there are double standards at play. You've got Donald Trump, who is targeting India, but not China. We're being pushed to the wall when it comes to agriculture and dairy. What do you think is the way out? And in case we're not able to arrive at a deal because the demands are so stark and so strong, what will happen to India if we get a 50% tariff?
Parikshit, let me put this answer to you in a counter perspective. India is one of those very few countries in the world which is yet to reach a deal with the United States. In terms of comparable economies, it is only China from Asia which is yet to reach a deal, and perhaps Brazil or Canada, Mexico in their own separate. But let's look at the countries which have reached a deal with the United States. Nobody knows what the content of those deals are except for what has been put out by President Trump himself on the Truth Social and certain other comments that have been picked up from here and there. There is no official record of any deals that has come out either from the American government or from the other governments on what has been signed till now in the majority of cases. And I can share with you one fact. It is in this game that is coming out. There is a feeling that is growing among all countries that have signed deals with the United States that no deal with the US is enough. Matters are not going to end here. The fact that you have got a lower rate of reciprocal tariffs brought down from 20% to 15% for a hypothetical country does not mean that its main exports are exempted from the Section 232 tariffs that exist on steel, aluminium, automobile, auto parts, and there are 8 more investigations going on in Section 232. So where is the guarantee that a country which has been spared on the reciprocal tariff with a lower margin will not be slapped with Section 232 tariffs in the later stage, maybe on critical minerals or maybe on pharmaceuticals?
That's an important
And in addition to that, there are transshipment tariffs. Look at a country like Vietnam, whose dependence on the American market for exports is so high that even though it has got a 20% reciprocal tariff and removed practically all barriers on American exports to Vietnam, it's still saddled with a 40% tariff where it is totally at the mercy of the US border and customs protection.
Absolutely.
We decided how much of local content has actually come from Vietnam and actually from Noah. So as a result of which...
Yeah. So, Mr. Palit, I'm running out of time, but you made a very important point that, you know, irrespective of the deals that Donald Trump has already agreed upon, there is never enough for Donald Trump. And that's what probably India also has in mind, that we may give a deal, even if we give a deal to him on his terms, it doesn't really mean that he'll end there. There may be more demands that may come up next year, and global supply chains and global trade will definitely be impacted this year and in the coming years as well. So this is all that India also has to keep in mind. Thank you very much for joining us on the program.
You're welcome.